Hi everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today I'm just doing a quick spoiler-filled review of Dexter Original Sin Season 1. Now, I was covering every single episode as it came out, but I was running into issues. One, I didn't have too much to say about certain individual episodes, and two, those videos weren't particularly doing great. However, I do just want to say I liked Dexter Original Sin overall. So I'm just going to go through everything I liked, everything I didn't like, interesting things that jumped out to me, and what I want to see from the show moving forward. So first off, I think the cast is actually really good. I think Christian Slater is great. I think Patrick Gibson as Dexter is excellent. And I do stand by the choice of them having his inner monologue be Michael C. Hall. Again, I think a few people have kind of mentioned this, but I appreciate that this series is Dexter kind of going through and looking back on his memories rather than real-time monologue. In the original series, he would react to things in the moment. You know, someone would potentially be about to catch him and you go, fuck, what does this mean? Whereas in this one, he's looking back. So there's this sense of like, you know, omnipotence that I kind of do like. Yeah, I mean, I appreciate it. The second thing I appreciate is there are some things that manage to skip the issues of being a prequel. Mainly everything with Brian Moser. We already know how the story with Brian Moser ends, but I feel like most of the Dexter fandom kind of agrees that that plot line was done early. That could have been a great season 3 or even season or series finale of the original run of Dexter, the whole Brian Moser story. But what this season of Original Sin does is just give you more Brian. You really get a good image of Brian's backstory. It makes Christian Slater's Harry look real fucking bad. It's well done. It's a really, really good sequence, and particularly episode 9, I actually adored. A lot of this show kind of oscillated between pretty good, occasionally campy, some rubbish stuff, but episode 9, and I think parts of episode 10 where you're seeing these montages of Brian Moser being moved around from home to home and he keeps getting kicked out because of his murderous tendencies, was really well done. Also, I actually appreciate that this show was a lot darker than I expected. There's literally a scene where young Brian Moser starts choking a baby in a bassinet. Like, it's wild. Also, there's just this great attempted kill scene towards the end of the season where Dexter stabs a needle that he's meant to, like, tranquilize someone with through someone's hand. It's a very gritty fight. Again, Patrick Gibson is fantastic. There's a great sense of physicality, but he really embodies also a sense of awkwardness. The only thing I'll say is I think at points they want him to be a bit too young. There are some flashbacks and stuff like that where he's talking about his serial killer urges, where it does look like a 35-year-old man trying to convey what should be like 16-year-old dialogue, and as a result the dialogue feels very unnatural and strange. But aside from that, he's excellent, and that really was just a script writing issue. And I feel the same about Deb, actually. I thought initially her actress was doing a really bad job, and then all of a sudden she crushed it. So I think it was just a writing thing. Now, what I will say is I was not as against the Deborah plot lines as a lot of people were. A lot of people thought this was silly high school drama and didn't really serve the plot, and they kind of wanted to get back to Dexter murdering people. And I have to disagree. I guess my only issue is that, truthfully, we spend a lot of time building up this love story with Deb and the guy she was into that kind of was leading her on, and ultimately it doesn't go anywhere. And you know what? I'm fine with it not being linked to some greater murder plot or really like feeding into the main narrative. But I guess my issue was I didn't really learn much about Deb or get great character insight, and I don't think the show's writers were properly equipped to really deal with the emotional fallout this has on a young woman in her formative years. You know what I mean? I feel like if they really wanted to go for like actual coming of age high school drama from a female lens, they actually could have done it well and really taken it seriously. But kind of the way it's presented is you got some interesting banter and growth with Dexter from it, but it kind of just ends like a wet fart. And by the end of the season, you're not really thinking about it. Was his name Gio? You're not really thinking about it. The ensemble cast is excellent. Excellent. Young Masuka is great. Young Batista is great. But some of the MVPs here are the new characters. Patrick Dempsey as this police chief who ends up being a corrupt police chief is fantastic. He's giving this his all. He really, really commits to the bit. Patrick Dempsey is interesting because he's been on a run of doing like really interesting roles. He was in Thanksgiving as a villain again. I like that he's kind of leaning into being campy villains. And you know what? I actually like that the show kind of reveals to us that it's him early on, because I think most perceptive people are like, okay, he's a prequel character, not in the original series, and the only way this narrative can possibly be satisfying is if this killer is someone we know. So I think a lot of us thought either it's Sarah Michelle Gellar or Patrick Dempsey, and then when we saw it was a male build, we were like, okay, it's Patrick Dempsey. So I appreciated them telling us early, and what that allowed was for us kind of watching how Dexter figures it out, and I thought that was really entertaining. I thought all of Dexter's original kill scenes were wonderful. I did think initially that maybe he got the hang of it a bit too quickly, but as the show kind of keeps going and evolves, you start seeing how sloppy it can be. Maybe you just got lucky that first time. Great set pieces. I love the one in that like rink where they play the ball game where he's like taunting the guy. Dexter does that a few times this season where he adds kind of layers and touches. Notably at the end of the season, he cuts Patrick Dempsey's finger off as sort of this like, how do you like it moment. And I think it's really well done. There's also a good sense of humor in this show. Occasionally you'll have like an adult, well done show. There was this well done joke. There was this great punchline in the last 2 episodes I just watched where Dexter was drawing blood and kind of hurt Patrick Dempsey in the process, and then said something along the lines of like, this is foreplay for tonight. Good stuff. Again, the narration keeps it moving, and ultimately I just found this season very satisfying overall, except for one thing, and that was the flashbacks with Dexter's mother. Unfortunately, I appreciated what they were going for. They put the Breaking Bad flashback piss filter over all these flashbacks, which is really quite a shame. But truthfully, I just think we needed less, or we needed her to be a bit more of a compelling character. I genuinely feel like we had this situation where Harry would go up to her and she'd be like, I need to get out. This is getting bad. And he'd be like, this is the last job, I swear. I swear we saw that conversation 7 different times. And like, I get it. Like maybe that's the point. Like Harry is stringing her along and made a mistake. But god damn it. Like, every second episode was the same conversation of like, Harry, I need to get out, and him being like, just one last job, and then you're free. And it's like, so as a result, each episode you're kind of expecting it to be the one where she carks it, and then they don't do it. And then after a certain point, you're like, well, I've kind of been misled so many times that I've kind of lost interest. There was some interesting moments. I think actually showing her body cut up and like reenacting it was quite visceral and a lot more gory and confronting than I expected, and really kind of contextualizes what Dexter's trauma is, which I think the show initially kind of struggled to do at times, and also kind of showed what that would do to someone like Brian Moser as well. Also the fact that Harry runs in and picks up Dexter and not Brian. I thought all of it was like really, really well done and well visualized. I just found the actual journey in the flashbacks of getting there fucking boring. It looked like a telenovela. It sounded like a telenovela. I didn't think Harry and this woman, Dexter's mother, had much chemistry at all, and I didn't find the cheating subplot particularly moving. You know, I think if you want to explore that, do it well. Make me feel bad for, you know, Harry's original wife. Do something. But it was just really, it's weird. The things that they should have spent time on, like how he has to have his like love affairs child in their relationship, right? How he has to have his mistress's child in this family and how his wife has to deal with that. All of this could have been really, really interesting stuff, especially after he essentially was responsible for losing their initial child. Like really leaning to Harry being an accidental piece of shit. But I think they rushed through that, unfortunately, instead to just give us this will they, won't they, is she going to die moment and moment again. And it's probably, truthfully, the thing that hurt the pacing of the show the most. But I did enjoy a lot of these scenes with young Dexter learning about his relationship to women, learning about how he's going to kill. I appreciated seeing who he looks up to at the start of the season. You know, it's interesting that he kind of had to be taught to have this code and didn't really have this instinctual desire to be like that initially. You know, like we watch him look up to serial killers, the same type of serial killers that would eventually end up on his table in these early episodes. And I found that fascinating. I also did think the face-off between him and Patrick Dempsey was exciting. well done, and just good. And I also think Patrick Dempsey's villain was better than New Blood's villain. Now, this might be a hot take, but New Blood is one of my favorite seasons of Dexter. I know I've probably lost a few of you there, but I think it was well made, well shot. I love the really dark, somber tone, and it's something we didn't really get in other seasons of Dexter. So I really liked Dexter New Blood, but the weakest part of that kind of mini-series, Dexter New Blood, was the villain. It just felt very like run-of-the-mill. Okay, yeah, he's evil, whatever. Patrick Dempsey, I understood his motivation, and you know what? He actually made my skin crawl. I thought it was really well done. Watching him use police corruption and racism to pin it on other people and generalize is really smarmy shit. Watching him walk into a room and be like, yeah, it's these fucking guys, and kind of try and get a reaction to them so he can shoot them, and really acting overzealous about his concern with his kid. All of it was really, really well done. And once you know it's him for sure, you really start to hate him, and you're rooting for Dexter to kill him. And sometimes that can be the weakness of a Dexter season, is you're just kind of impartial to the serial killer. But here I thought it was really, really well done, and you're kind of enjoying the chase. And also, like, I think it's a good, not even like an allegory, just a good demonstration of like abusive ex-partners. Like, he's literally using the child as a weapon, as a pawn, as a manipulation tactic in the most evil sense. He's literally going to kill their kid. And I think it's a good sort of extension of that idea that when, men and women get divorced, oftentimes the abusive partner is like, well, if I can't have you, no one can, or I'm going to hurt you through the dog or the child. Like, it feels like that turned up to 11. And I think it's really, really well done. I also thought this show had some touching moments. I thought towards the end of the season, when Harry is opening up to Dexter and being like, I couldn't be more proud of you, well done with this code you've built. It's like an effective scene. It's an effective scene because we know how dark the story gets for Dexter. He loses his wife. He kills multiple innocent people in New Blood and in the original run of the show. He fails on his code. He ultimately, isolates and becomes a lumberjack. So all these moments of sweetness between Harry and Dexter, or where Dexter thinks he can actually make a life like this work, has this sense of tragedy attached to it because of, what we know that happens in the original run of the show. I don't think this show falls into massive prequelitis, except for the fact that we could very quickly figure out who the villain was. But in a positive note, I think we're not really sure what's going to happen to Sarah Michelle Gellar. And that's a curious point of mystery, I find. I'm sort of like, okay, this is a good part of being a prequel. Now, I will say, oftentimes the gold standard for prequels, the thing everyone compares every prequel to, is Better Call Saul. Better Call Saul is one of the best shows of all time. I'm not going to disagree, but I disagree slightly with it being classed entirely as a prequel, because the Breaking Bad show was not about Saul Goodman. He was a minor character, and when you watch Better Call Saul, it's not that it feels like a different character, but the show is entirely different because he is the main character. Walter White and Jesse are basically non-existent in in Better Call Saul for most of its run. And I find this comparison when people are like, it's no Better Call Saul, that really showed how to do a prequel. I'm like, no, it showed how to do a spin-off, in my opinion, that just happened to be set earlier in the timeline. It doesn't feel like a direct prequel, in my opinion. Yes, they're set in the same world, but the reason I say this is I think Dexter has a harder job, Dexter Original Sin, because it does have to work well with the original series and not negate a bunch of stuff. And it's focusing on characters that we've had like 100 hours with at this point. So I think what they do with Deb is good. I think what they do with Dexter, for the most part, is good, minus kind of the blowjob subplot and some things that maybe feel like slight retcons. The big one I struggle with is Harry. Because you know what? In a good way, I prefer this version of Harry in this show. I thought Harry in the original run of the series was the worst part of the show. The show had no clue what to do with him. His dialogue was consistently strange, and I could never get a good read on who he was as a person. Now in Dexter Original Sin, I have a good read of Christian Slater's Harry, but not a good read of the Harry in the original show. Now, the only thing that can possibly explain this, right, this difference in character, is that the version of events we're seeing in Original Sin is Dexter's memory, like looking back on these things, how he remembers these people, whereas in the original Dexter, because it's more present thought, it's just what it actually is. So maybe he looks back and remembers Christian Slater, Harry, as way more positive and enthusiastic and lovely and warm to be around and like emotionally consistent. But yeah, I don't know. Now, there is some goofy shit in this show. There's this scene where Brian Moser punches his hand through a wall. The really young Brian Moser actor kind of struggles in scenes. Also, some of the scene transitions are ridiculous. There's also like I don't like the whole like speeding up in between transitionary shots. But on the other hand, there's some really good visual storytelling. I like that when Dexter shows up to crime scenes, he's envisioning how these kind of murders happened, and there's a good sense of spectacle attached there. I also think the monologue is really tight and crisp, and truthfully, I'm constantly waiting for Michael C. Hall's voice to come into the show. I also think this show has a lot more to say about social issues and kind of contrasting, morality back then to social issues now, and I think it does it in quite an effective way and is something that was maybe lacking in the original run of the show, but I think is done in New Blood well as well. I also did just appreciate that this show wasn't afraid to be dark, wasn't afraid to be quite full on and edgy. You're seeing nudity and drug use and like very explicit violence at times. I thought initially the kill scenes were pretty tame, but as the show goes on, it definitely does intensify in its brutality. And I appreciate that they weren't making watered down Dexter. Is this a must watch? Not really, but if you're interested, I actually think it's worth your time. And I think when the show starts really hitting its stride, it starts crushing it. Episode 9 with the emotional beats with Brian Moser, I was really feeling bad for Brian Moser. There is a sense of tragedy there that kind of links to the end of season 1. Fantastic, really well done. And I also think the ending of season 1 is pitch perfect. Watching Dexter build this family, not knowing about Brian Moser properly, but Harry knows about Brian Moser and they've had this face off and Brian Moser is there watching on from the shadows. It's sad. It's actually, you feel bad for him, even though at this point, Brian Moser, I'm pretty sure, has cut someone in half with a chainsaw. Like, it's an insane show, but I also have to give it credit. I think what it sets up here, I could watch a few more seasons of. If Dexter Original Sin starts being a parallel story with basically a Brian Moser origin story, I'm kind of excited. You get what I mean? Like if season 2 of Original Sin, we're watching Dexter do usual Dexter shit, and like you kind of seeing that being like, well, what's the point of this prequel? But then we're watching Brian Moser become the Brian Moser we met only briefly in season 1. I think that's a really cool idea, and I hope they lean into it more. I also think the actor that plays younger but like current day for Original Sin, Brian Moser, is good. He's really, really good. But yeah, truthfully, I think Patrick Dempsey kind of stole the show in my opinion. Patrick Gibson is excellent. I can't wait to see more of Sarah Michelle Gellar. I hope they cut out certain goofy dialogue moments and get some better screenwriting in these moments with particularly Deborah. But aside from that, and hopefully cut out the flashback stuff, I think that was kind of the weakest part of this show. And also it's a flashback within a flashback. But with those few kind of like changes, I actually think we have a really decent show on our hands. It's not must-watch television. I'm not looking forward to it the way I was looking forward to, say, Penguin or White Lotus or Severance. But you know what? For something I turn on when I'm just chilling at home and need to kick back and relax and want something that is engaging, fun, and effective, efficient storytelling, I think this show is really quite good. And I want more of Patrick Gibson as this character. Like, genuinely want more. And I appreciate the editing, the color grading, the music. I'm looking forward to what they do next with Dexter Original Sin. Thank you so much for watching. If you're enjoying my videos at all, please consider getting a membership to this channel. You get access to a podcast where I talk about every show and movie I've watched every month. It's either every 2 weeks or every month. On top of that, I'm also going to be covering every episode of White Lotus Season 3 as it comes out week to week. So please consider getting a membership. Thank you so much for watching and have a lovely day. Also, I filmed a review of Dexter New Blood and then I lost the file. I'm shattered because it was really good and I just finished watching Dexter New Blood. But if you guys want a review of Dexter New Blood, please let me know in the comments below and I'll get on it because I could talk about that season of Dexter all day. I'm ride or die for Dexter New Blood. Thank you so much for watching. Please consider liking, subscribing, and commenting, and have a lovely day.